Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2026 Directors Closeup. My name is Jeremy Aguilera-Gaudet, Project Manager for Education and International Programs at Film Independent, and we are thrilled that you can join us on day 6 of our series. Tonight, we will hear from the filmmakers who are nominated for the John Cassavetes Award at the Film Independent Spirit Awards. I would like to thank this year's incredible supporters of the Directors Closeup, the Directors Guild of America, SAG Indie, and IMDb Pro. And thank you to our 2026 Film Independent Spirit Awards supporters, premier sponsor Lavazza Coffee, principal sponsor IMDb Pro, and official partner Fiji Water. We appreciate their support and devotion to the independent film community. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening to hear from our panel of very talented filmmakers. To qualify for the John Cassavetes Award, you must have made your feature film for under $1 million. These directors have brought to the screen some amazing and inspiring stories at truly independent film budgets, and I'm excited to hear how they got their films made. To ask questions, please use the Q&A function located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will get to as many of your questions as we can during the panel. And here with us tonight are Cristian Carretero and Lorraine Molina Jones, writer and directors of Esta, Isla. Oh. Hi, Cristian. Hi, Lorraine.
Oh, there you go.
Hi, thanks for joining us. Sarah Friedland, a writer and director of Familiar Touch. Hey, Sarah. Julian Glander, writer and director of Boys Go to Jupiter.
Hello, thanks for
Hey,
having
Julian.
me.
And Carson Lund, co-writer and director of Eephus.
Hello,
Hey, Carson.
happy to be here.
Thanks everyone for joining us. And moderating tonight's panel is writer-director Alessandra Lacorazza. Welcome, Alessandra.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a great panel, everybody.
Awesome. So excited to be chatting with all of you. As I mentioned, I really loved all of your films. So to get us started, and I'll call on you individually, but I want, not everyone who's here might have seen your film, so tell us a little bit about your film and then kind of how it started for you, whether it was, an impulse, an image, a question, or a feeling that really made you want to spend years with the film. Julian, let's start with you.
Oh, I have to go first? I was going to think of my answer while someone else was talking. Okay, that's fine. I'm also going to direct my performance here. I'm going to be doing like some camera moves and stuff within the Zoom frame because I feel like people, everyone's always centered in this Zoom. What if we were doing something a little more Hitchcockian like this to show how nervous I am? I'll get to answer your question. By films called Boys Go to Jupiter. It's an animated coming of age story about a teenage delivery driver in suburban Florida. I think the first image that kind of started the whole process was actually sent to me. I was getting Uber Eats in the kind of the middle of pandemic during the early days of contactless delivery. And when the Uber Eats driver drops off and they have to take a picture of it at your doorstep, I got the picture from Uber Eats and I was in the picture, looking through the window in a very unflattering kind of ghostly way. And that kind of started me thinking about the gig economy and how it has sort of very sneakily wormed its way into all of our lives and changed our relationships with work and each other. And to put a note on your last part is what made you want to spend years with this idea. I really didn't know how long this was going to take. I think if I had known, I maybe never would have started, but thankfully I did.
How many years did it take you from beginning to it being out in the world?
I think it was about 3 years writing it, and then 1 year really doing production, and then there's a lot of work afterwards when you think you're done. It's been about 1.5 years of emails after I finished making a movie. But I love emails.
Amazing. Sarah, let's go to you next in Familiar Touch.
I don't love emails, so bless you, Julian.
I'll do your emails for you.
Great, that's we'll swap. Yeah, hi everybody. So Familiar Touch is a coming of old age film, and it follows an 80-year-old woman in her transition into a care facility. But instead of being sort of portrait of decline or loss, it's a close character study of her relationship to herself, her desires, her caregivers, and how that shifts in this moment of transition. And even though it's a scripted film, we made it with a real retirement community with residents and care staff and did a filmmaking workshop there. So it's a scripted fictional film, but it also has this kind of pedagogical and hybrid component to it. And the earliest kernels for it, I mean, timeline, it took, start to finish, it took about a decade. And the earliest kernel was a personal experience and a professional experience. Personally, my paternal grandmother had dementia, and she was a poetry editor and an intellectual and someone whose sense of self was very much rooted in her linguistic expression. And when a few years into her dementia, she became nonverbal, my family started speaking about her in the past tense. And yet at the time I was starting to study dance. My background's making dance films. And I would visit her at the care facility that she spent the last few years of her life. And she was so physically expressive. She would rock, she would tap rhythm, she would reach out to touch you. She was so there, but just expressing herself in this embodied form rather than a verbal one. And that gap between the person who we spoke about in absentia and the person who continued to live and be herself, that gap haunted me for many, many years after she passed. Cut to about a decade later, I'd been doing every entry-level job you can on a film set and production office, and reached a point where I felt like if I want to make films about anyone other than filmmakers, I need to meet them, but I needed a day job. So I answered an ad for a caregiving agency that staffed a lot of creative clients and ended up becoming a care worker doing home care for New York City artists with dementia. And that job changed everything I thought I understood about aging and the sort of intimacy of care labor, and the sort of way we continue to express ourselves, even as the challenges of aging change how we do so and change how we see ourselves. And that led to becoming a teaching artist and teaching film to older adults and making intergenerational films. And so Familiar Touch was kind of this weaving together of personal, professional, pedagogical, and cinematic experiences.
That's beautiful. Carson, let's go to you next.
So I made Eephus in 2022. I think we'd been writing it for about a year and a half prior to that. So we kind of started writing it during COVID. And I think, I should say what the film is first. Eephus is a movie about one rec league baseball game played in New England. The last game played on a field that is set for demolition to make way for a middle school. It is sort of like an end of an era film, a bunch of grown men who play baseball together and have played baseball together for some of them decades, some of them just a few years, but they have all sort of built these bonds together on a field. And that's sort of like a very specific kind of friendship. And they're all coming to terms with having to, lose this field, this outlet for their connection and their joy and playing this game of baseball, which is a game that I've always played myself for a very long time. I was very serious about it and thought I might go pro someday. Eventually, I shifted and became more interested in filmmaking. So I actually left baseball for a very long time, partially because it was the culture around it and the sort of competitive one-upmanship of it all. I got quite tired of. I started pursuing filmmaking, but when I moved to Los Angeles, I'm originally from New England. I moved to Los Angeles, and suddenly I had this hankering to play baseball again. The weather's very warm all year round, so I had the chance to, and I joined a rec league. So, just something anyone who plays baseball can do. You just join a league. There's a small fee, and everyone gets together and does this thing once a week on Sunday. So, I've played on the same team for many years now. And I felt that at this age, I'm in my mid 30s, but there are many people on my team who are older, some a bit younger, but it's really a hodgepodge of different individuals who love the game and really go for the love of the game. I found that there was just such an interesting community there, and it was the kinds of people I was interacting with. There was humor, there was poignancy, and I felt like it was kind of social bonding group that I hadn't seen depicted in a feature film before, in a way that was sincere and authentic. And there's many sports films, obviously, many movies about baseball, but I felt like I had not seen this topic explored with any kind of depth. So I wanted to make a movie that really was about really a kind of a landscape film about a certain field that I fell in love with in my scouting process, and we chart that field from the middle of the day to the nighttime, and we show this game that just seems to be going on forever. It becomes a kind of purgatory, and it's really about a bunch of people coming to terms with the end of a chapter in their lives and questioning what comes beyond that. I think it's also about many say, oh, the male epidemic, the male loneliness epidemic. It's a big buzzword. I guess the film also touches on that. So yeah, I think in total it took from the moment we started writing to the premiere in Cannes, I think it took probably 4 or 5 years. So I know that's somewhat quick, but it feels like it's occupied my entire adult life at this point.
Yeah, amazing. Cristian and Lorraine.
Yes. What's up, guys? All your films sound amazing, so I'm really honored to be part of this group and hearing you guys talk. So we made Esta Isla, this island. We directed, produced, wrote, also edited. So it was kind of like a very low budget guerrilla type of production where we also involved a lot of the communities where we shot in front, but also behind the camera. And it's a lovers on the run coming of age, we would say. And it tells the story of Bebo, this teenager who lives in a public housing complex in the west coast of the island. He lives with his brother, uh, his older brother, who's a fisherman, and uh, because of necessity, his older brother starts picking up drug packages out at sea to make ends meet. And he gets in some trouble, and things happen, which forces Bebo to go on the run with his new girlfriend Lola, which is also from kind of like a higher um social strata, I guess. So they both go on the run to the center of the island because Puerto Rico is coast, but in the middle is all mountains. So they go into the heart of the island. And through this escape, they get to know more about themselves, but also about their context. So it's kind of like a way, conceptually, we wanted to talk about adolescence and this moment in your life where you start defining who you are, or you ask yourself many things like, try to define your destiny or where you're going. So we had this like parallel between the two kids, the two teenagers, the main characters, and their coming of age, but also Puerto Rico as well as a society, in a way, coming of age or trying to understand where it belongs or where it's going, since, we are always been kind of like a colony of Spain or the United States. So it's this identity thing happening. And yeah, I mean, we started working on it like around 10 years. I mean, we had the idea of it, or we started conceptualizing. We wrote a treatment like 10 years ago. And then we moved and we worked on different projects. We kind of like didn't have the time to work on it. And we started producing TV. We moved back to Puerto Rico. And eventually in COVID, we need to make this film. I mean, because we moved back to Puerto Rico to make the film, but then we got work and we started working on this, it was really like nonstop work. It was like a weekly TV show, and we had other things we were developing. But it was kind of like, we need to make this film. And we started rewriting during COVID. And eventually we just like were able to get a group together and get some money to like, we can shoot this with this money, and then we'll figure out what to do afterwards.
That's awesome.
So eventually, it happened, and we got a lot of support how I said, from the people themselves, the way we're trying to portray their stories. So in the end, also it was kind of a collection of different anecdotes and different characters that we've met living here, because we shot it all around this west part of the island where we actually live currently. So so it was also a way to speak about this contemporary Puerto Rican reality.
I just wanted to add that I feel like that was kind of what started us. We wanted to see a film that, like, we didn't feel we were seeing Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rico that we live and know, and we really wanted people to know us.
That was actually going to be one of my first questions to you, is because it feels like Puerto Rico is really a character in your film. So I wanted to hear a little bit about your research process, working with the local communities, and how that informed the script that you already wrote.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in that time where we had the idea and then we started writing the script, and we were working, and like we would drop the script and come back to it. We also made a documentary, and it was it was about the agricultural movement in Puerto Rico. So it's like about a lot of young people coming back to the roots, coming back to the land, coming back to appreciating and honoring our ancestors, or our traditions, our culture. And so I think that really also motivated us, like inspired us a lot. And that's definitely in the film, because that's something that in a way has been lost, and it's important to come back to.
I mean, we spend months going to these places, you know, and trying to get the trust of the people, you know, since we wanted to make a film that didn't invade these spaces but embrace them, and kind of like, that's why we had very little people in the crew, very little equipment, and let the spaces talk to us, you know, let the island itself or speak through the film, you know, so undisturbed in a way. So yeah, see, it was a very important character. I mean, it's called Esta Isla, you know, because it's about Puerto Rico, but it's also kind of like the island of the South, you know, like Esta Isla.
Amazing. Carson, I'm going to go to you next. I loved your film, as I said, and I think one of the things I loved about it was its usage of time, which felt like a character in it. And it's trying to make social commentary without it really trying to be about that. But I was curious about your structure, how you came to your structure, and what the process in the editing room was for the pacing, just because time being such a big deal in your film, how you kind of approached that in the editing room.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm very drawn to unconventional narrative structures. I really enjoy structuralist experimental films. You know, I was looking for a container for the movie that wasn't a kind of 3-act narrative structure. It took me a long time to kind of land on an idea for something that I felt would be like achievable with a low budget, that also had some structure that excited me, when I decided that the film would be the length of a baseball game, it seemed obvious, but it took a long time for me to get there. So I felt I wanted to account for all the time and all the different units of time that make up a baseball game. You know, it's 9 innings, 3 outs every half inning. So we had to figure out, you know, how are we spending that time? When we wrote this script, myself and my 2 co-writers, Nate Fisher and Mike Basta, we really imagined, like, first, what do we want to see in a baseball game? Like, what is the action? Are there any spectacular events? If not, what does happen? You know, and once we decided kind of how the game was structured as a sporting event, we actually kind of wrote it out as what's called a box score. So like kind of a visual map of a baseball game's progression. Once we kind of figured out all those things and kind of what the lineup was for each team and who played where in the field, it allowed us to kind of think about it spatially and temporally, and we navigated around that game to figure out what is of importance in this given moment, you know. And eventually we fell in love with the characters, and certain characters emerged more than others, but really we didn't want any single protagonist. I've felt more like the camera should just be an observer of this game, and it should be free to move within the game and also to the outskirts and see people in the dugout and see people in the bleachers who are watching. It was really more about like, what can a single park over the course of one afternoon, what can it contain in terms of human activity? And so it was, we allowed ourselves a lot of freedom in terms of where we would move our narrative attention throughout that 9-inning span. And I think originally we were thinking really ambitiously and almost conceptually about, well, this game should last as long as a baseball game would last, right? It should be like a real-time experiment. We ultimately didn't do that because it would have bored everyone to tears. Maybe we'll do a installation piece someday. that's like all the feeds, different cameras. I don't know, but ultimately, what we ended up doing was embracing more of a narrative film. I think my original cuts were somewhere in between 2 and 3 hours, and eventually, I just through enough massaging and kind of feedback sessions and just talking out the idea with close collaborators and peers, figuring out what was really essential while also trying to maintain that sense of real time. It was like this constant tug of war between, kind of drifting off and also bringing the viewer back to some sense of momentum. And I think what we really wanted to do was capture the unique sense of time that baseball kind of creates, because it is a game that has long periods of stasis and then sudden bits of action. So we felt like really we wanted that to be evoked in the editing, so that you'll kind of get lulled into a meditative state, and then something exciting will happen in the game, and then maybe we go back to a lull, or then we do a long monologue, and it was really, there wasn't a sort of exact science to this. It was really more about just a gut feeling about where we wanted to go with the edit. But the edit, which I did myself, took a very long time to kind of find exactly that balance that wouldn't sort of completely lull the audience to sleep. But I do really love cinema that leaves a lot of space for the viewer to wander mentally. I don't like to hold the hand too much. I like the viewer to get sort of lost in the atmosphere. And I think this was like a perfect narrative container for that to happen, while also giving you a bunch of characters that I think are very charming and eccentric.
Yeah, it was so fun to watch. I really, really loved it. Julian, I'm going to go to you next. So I spent a lot of my formative years in Florida, and so watching your film felt so nostalgic to me, and it was so Florida in the most beautiful, beautiful way. It was also so singular in tone. It was funny and strange, but yet kind of emotionally sincere, which I found fascinating. And I'm really curious as to your animation style, which is so specific, but yet also feels like part of the film's kind of emotional grammar. So how did you come to this idea of working in animation, and how did the form kind of inform how you wrote and directed the film?
Well, first of all, thank you. It's kind of amazing to me. It feels like almost everybody has some sort of Florida connection, whether it was they were forced to live there for a few years, as I was, or grandparents live there, or it's, special childhood memories. And it is kind of a special place that we all understand without understanding it. Like, we know what Florida is, even though it doesn't make sense. I have always worked in animation. It's kind of always, or I would say it's like, it would have been the only way to make this movie. And a lot of what I was thinking about was, what is a story that can live within the constraints of like super, super, super low budget sometimes a minimalist animation. And I think the Florida setting is really perfect for that, because in my own mind, it's like a dream and I kind of only half remember it. So it's a little bit easier for me to put together like my version of what a gas station would look like. It's also, this is a little hacky, I guess, but it's like, what came out of the writing process and the pre-production process is very much a story about alienation and isolation, which meant it kind of led visually to a lot of wide open spaces, empty or semi-abandoned spaces, which are a lot easier to animate than spaces that are full of people. And that was sort of like, that's kind of like one slice of the guiding principle of the whole movie, is like, where can you find constraints or shortcuts that are also kind of thematically interesting?
That makes sense. Sarah, let's go to you. I was really scared to watch your film because I also have some personal experience with dementia and Alzheimer's. But once I watched it, it is so human and so light at the same time. So I was kind of struck, but it felt like there was like a lot of restraint from you as a filmmaker. So I was kind of curious where that came from. Was it inside the writing or performances or directing on set or even in the editing room? And were there ever moments that felt like they emotionally worked but felt dishonest in the world that you were trying to build?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that I never set out to make a dementia drama. It's kind of become a specific genre that there are beautiful films within it, but I think there is this sort of trope of the decline narrative where the drama is all about a person losing themselves. And what I found when I was working as a caregiver was that my clients were more in touch with the parts of themselves that persisted than they were what was being lost. And there was so much joy and poetry and play in our daily life that was there amidst the loss. And I felt that had never been captured before. And also that the relationships with caregivers are usually relegated to the sidelines. So I wanted the kind of poetry of what I'd seen with the older adults I'd cared for to come through. And to do that, one of the earliest choices I made in the writing was that it needed to be from Ruth, our protagonist's perspective, because I think we get to that really heavy, tragic feeling in films about this stage of life by privileging the perspective of younger people looking at older people, and then they are fearing death, they are fearing aging, and it all becomes this sort of drama of loss. And so as I mentioned before, I come from a dance background, and so I felt that the way to do that tonally was to put us not in Ruth's cognitive perspective, but in her embodied perspective, and that we'd come to see the world through her senses: touch, taste, smell, etc. And so I went about trying to figure out in the writing, and then with Kathleen Chalfont and on set with our different department heads, how do we create a sort of grammar for the film where we're in her body rather than in her cognition. Because I think that's also how we get to that sort of really heavy tone of loss, is by seeing people as just their brains. And I think we make sense of the world literally through our senses. And in the case of memory loss, as much as people's cognition declines, their sensations are often heightened. So I wanted to sort of use that as an opportunity to be in Ruth's body and to sort of have the film be more sensory than plot based. So I think that's sort of where the tone comes from. And then in terms of the restraint, we shot over 18 and a half days, and because we were shooting in a real care facility, we couldn't go over 8 hours. So there really is not very much that we shot that got cut. I'd say the only thing that did was I realized quickly in the edit with our editors, Acharya Unsriwang and Kate Abernathy, that we couldn't leave Ruth's perspective. Like in the script, there were sort of these little moments where you would kind of like boomerang out and back to her, and it worked on the page, and it didn't in the edit. That by going to a younger person, it sort of punctured the spell of being with her. So that was the one place where we had to kind of pull back edit.
It's amazing that you only had 8 hours to shoot and had 18 days. So you really had to be so efficient. and everything that you were doing is really incredible. I want to talk about casting because everyone's casting in all of your films is incredible. And I find, everybody talks about casting and budget level. So I want to hear from everyone about your process for casting and how you secured actors and then how you worked with them a little bit. But Sarah, let's start with you. And I would also, in addition to that, like, how did you work with Kathleen did you have a rehearsal process to kind of get into the mindset or, tell us a little bit about how you worked with her.
Yeah, so I mean, we worked with an amazing casting director named Betsy Fincher, and she was really amazing in kind of helping guide who needed to be professional actors and who we could cast from within this community. And so she and I had been working on casting the film for many, many years, and Kathleen and I found each other only very, very close to filming. So we actually met on the first day in person for the first time. There was no time for rehearsal. So we sort of agreed upon principles together of how we would craft Ruth. Some of them, for example, were that she would have a fluid age identity, that she wouldn't be fixed at 80, but that in different scenes would move from child Ruth to teenage Ruth to middle-aged Ruth. And sometimes it was scripted specifically, and sometimes it was open for her to play. And that was one of the dances that we had the most fun with. We also decided very early on that because the film is moving through her different sort of senses of self and different age identities, that we wouldn't root ourselves in each scene in what had happened before. Like, so often, when you're filming out of order, you say, okay, well, this is this scene, this came before, this comes after. And we decided not to do that. We'd treat each scene as its own temporal universe. So she and I like to sort of create these like logics and rules that helped us. But she's just the most extraordinary collaborator and had this way of mentoring me while collaborating and trusting me at the same time. And was really willing to kind of enter Ruth through her body. This was my first time directing professional actors, and so I'm used to directing dancers. And that sort of gestural language was a shared entry point that was really helpful for us. But then in terms of casting within the real care facility, we did a 5-week-long workshop where we taught filmmaking soup to nuts leading up to pre-production. And so Carolyn Michelle, who plays Vanessa in the film, the primary care worker, taught an acting workshop. And so after that, different residents and care workers signed up to be different characters in the film. And I worked with another resident who was sort of our kind of like internal casting director there. And she said, oh, this person would be good for this scene. And so there were kind of two parallel and integrating casting processes going on, one with the lead roles with Betsy and then one within this workshop process.
Amazing. Cristian and Lorraine, tell me a little bit about your casting process and also how you cultivated the intimacy between the actors, which was so potent.
Our casting process, we saw like over 250 people around the island, different parts of the island. And I feel like we were able to get a mix of non-actors and professional actors, which was really helpful. Like, I feel that something happens or is created in the moments, they can help each other out. And I feel that was very beneficial. And I feel like as far as intimacy, I think that we had a very small crew, and we didn't do a lot of rehearsing or anything, but I think we just gave space for the person to be able to bring their own thoughts or reactions. And I just feel like it was more about seeing that person could take on the role because they had the essence, like they had an essence of this character. And like our lead actress is also a dancer. I feel like there's, just listening to you, like there's this way, there's so much you can communicate through your body without saying anything. That's so beautiful and powerful, through film, especially to capture it. And yeah, there's something there that's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, when we did the casting, we were more interested to know more about the person, not necessarily like know if they can act the part, but know more about their essence, their soul, like their background, their connection with the character. We tend to cast people that are very similar to their character or have something, or so it was more like a storytelling back and forth type of casting. And also like we wanted to catch like how Lori was saying, like those moments in between, like not when they are saying their lines or anything, where we wanted people that we were mesmerized, just see them be, doing anything, just sitting or drinking coffee or anything. And but also like the protagonists are they hadn't acted before, but they were performers. Like Fabiola Brown, the lead actress, she's a dancer, ballet dancer. And she's also the daughter of this very famous Puerto Rican folk singer, Roy Brown. And also the male lead, he's also a singer, and he's the son of this very famous reggaeton artist called Zion, from this group called Zion y Lennox. So they kind of have this, they're really comfortable with being themselves in front of of an audience, I guess, and we had them go to these spaces as well, get them to know the people. So yeah, it was a very long also casting process. We saw a lot of people, and also the stories that were told in this casting sessions also, as some of them were implemented in the script as well. So they
That's
all
amazing.
fed from each other.
That's great. I love it. Carson, let's go next to you to tell me a little bit about your casting process and also working with such a huge cast of like what looks like incredible characters. Like, did they all have those big personalities off the screen also?
Definitely. For sure. Yeah, I would say I was my own casting director. My friend Mike Basta, also co-writer, helped me out quite a bit with it. Yeah, we had to. I think there were, well, there's two baseball teams, so that's 20 people right there. And then I think generally we'd have a handful of people on the outskirts, but I think overall the I forget the exact number, but we might be somewhere near 40 cast members in total. But because the film is real time, quasi real time, most of them are there the whole time. So that's a whole challenge logistically in terms of production, but I can get to that. But the casting process, I find it very fun. I find it a very fun process where the movie really starts to take shape and come to life. I would say that a quarter of the cast were people I'd worked with before, whether as a director making shorts or as a DP. I've shot several features, so I've worked with some of these people before on other films. And they were just people that I knew could they were fascinating people that I knew could carry these characters. And then probably another quarter of the cast were just people that I knew that don't act necessarily, or don't consider themselves actors primarily. Just friends of mine that I thought would be great in this project. And then the other half, I'd say we just had to find people. So we probably looked at hundreds and hundreds of faces, probably thousands of faces on different casting websites, specifically in the Boston area. Knowing that we were making a low budget film, we didn't really have a lot of money to bring people in from other cities. So we were looking at the Boston talent pool, and we'll just scroll through these faces. I mean, I really think I love faces in cinema. I think that interesting, unexpected, unconventionally beautiful faces they really bring a movie to life. And I think there's a sort of casting philosophy that maybe existed more in the 70s that doesn't exist so much anymore in terms of the kind of people that a film brings in. So I'm just looking for a face that excites me, and that's sort of like the first step. I find a face that looks like it belongs in this world, or looks like someone I remember playing with at some point in my life, or I remember someone who played in my dad's league because my dad's also a player. So it's just that there's certain kind of guys that look like baseball guys, and you just kind of know it when you see it. So that's like the first step, but then you have to start reaching out to these people, sending them pieces of the script just to see kind of how they fit in that sense. Obviously, the voice is very important too, but I'm not always looking for someone with a ton of acting experience or incredible chops as a performer. It's really that I think the unique filming scenario that we created, which was basically a bunch of people on a baseball field for a month playing around together. I felt like that scenario was going to create its own kind of camaraderie and comfort amongst the different performers. And I think that's really what happened. We actually had most of the cast living together in a cabin in the woods near the set throughout the production. And this is like a bunch of grown men that didn't know each other before the film, who really got along and and brought so much to it through their developing friendships that it really became like a summer camp or like a baseball team that all these guys like really got to know each other. And then I think whatever whatever might have been a little shaky in the first few days of filming was completely cleaned up by week 2. I think that there's something about I made sure that everyone I cast had some relationship to baseball. I didn't need expert sportsmanship or athleticism rather. I just needed people who had like an emotional attachment to the game, who understood how the game works and kind of the structure of it. Some had more experience than others in terms of actual playing, but it was really about a bunch of people, a motley crew of people who kind of are in different stages of their playing careers, and many of them just do it for the love of it, and not for the actual sport. So it was just that there was something about putting these people who had kind of a nostalgic connection to the game of baseball, putting them back on a field together in beautiful weather with beautiful fall foliage all around them. It just created this warmth and camaraderie that I think allowed us to, just really get some amazing group dynamics on screen. Most of the film is scripted. There are moments of improvisation, but I'd say that's only probably 15-20%. But when that did happen, it was because they brought something in the course of filming. They came up with ideas because they felt like they were living these characters for an entire month together. So it was like it felt wrong for me to say no to that. So and fortunately we had the time to do it. And directing a big group of people like this was like, it was kind of like being a baseball coach. Like I play myself, so I had to like whip everyone into shape. I would hit them ground balls. We'd play catch before we actually started shooting. It's just like to get, I think what Sarah's saying about like movement as being such a crucial part of performance and about expressing oneself. I mean, baseball has such a like ingrained behavioral patterns that just getting people to do those again, I think really just brought such an authenticity to all the performances.
Amazing. Julian, I want to hear about your casting process a little bit. You also have some incredible cast in your film, so about how you engaged them. And then also if you could speak a little bit about kind of working with them and collaborating. Your dialogue feels so organic, and so I'm curious if there was any improvisation or how you collaborated with the actors, and if in that collaboration you got any more insight or ideas into the character of the film.
Yeah, I think the first part of it is casting this movie was, I'm thinking back, I think it was the hardest part. It was the moment where I was like, there's not going to be a movie. My producer and I had both never worked on a feature film before, and we were trying to put this cast together the traditional way of reaching out to agents and managers, and we were just getting killed. We were just getting, if we would get a message back, it would be like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm not going to have my client look at this. So we kind of just started going around that. A lot of it was pulled together from like Instagram DMs. Maybe I will just tell the story all the way through of how we worked with Ava Victor, because they are a big awards nominee this year. I had worked with Ava. I had directed them on this kids TV show called Summer Camp Island a few years ago over Zoom, and I saw them at Mike's Coffee in Clinton Hill, and I almost didn't say hi because I'm very shy and I didn't know if they even knew who I was. But I went up, I said hi. Da, 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 da. We were talking for a little bit, and I was like, I'm trying to put together a movie. Like, will you record? Will you do an hour session with me like next week? And I'm actually very embarrassed by this because I was obviously a fan, but I didn't know how much of a genius Ava was. Like, this was 3 years ago, so I didn't know about Sorry Baby. Like, I didn't know they had it like that. And in the booth, it was very obvious. And yeah, to what you were asking about, like, Ava's character in the movie is the older sister of the main character, Billy. And it was a part that I really kind of dreaded recording and had hated writing, because it's something I see in a lot of movies where the dialogue is really I'm your older sister and the mom's not around and here's our life situation. Like, I hate seeing that in a movie, and I like couldn't figure it out, and I was like, I hope Ava figures it out. And I don't know, in an hour, like, we just cracked it together, and they found like all this like love and baggage and resentment in like a handful of lines. And it was kind of like that with the whole cast. It really is like a collage of people who I really admire, who are actors but also writers and directors, and TikTokers and bloggers. And the first cut of the movie was basically a radio play, and to me the whole movie is the voice performance, and I just put some images on top. And if the movie is good, which I do think it's good, it's because of them. So yeah, I don't know, I just got lucky, I guess.
Beautiful. So we're getting close to time in some ways. So this next few questions I'm just going to throw out there, and whoever feels inspired to answer it, just go for it. But so all these films were made under $1 million, and I think what's really striking is that in every case here, the budget feels so secondary to the filmmaking. So my question I have for you is, like, with the constraint of having a budget under $1 million, and I'm sure all your budgets are different, like, was there anything you gained from that? Anything that was like a positive in working with a lower budget?
Happy to start this one. My DP and I, partially because of the budget, partially because we were in a care facility, we knew that at any given moment we might have to leave a space. And so we created a tiered shot list where we figured out how could we get every single scene in one shot. Okay, if we have two, how do we do it? If it's three, how do we do it? And it was out of necessity because of the economy of how we were making it and the setting, but it led to us being so much more precise about what each shot was doing, and led to us thinking of sort of certain ways of filming scenes that I don't think we would have had we not been pushed to find that economy. And we're now starting to do very soft prep for the next one, and have decided we're going to just do this forever because it led to all of these ideas that came from the constraint. So I think that economy of visuals was something that I really discovered in the process.
Amazing. Anyone else want to take a stab at that one?
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, the budget for this movie was like as close to zero as a movie could get. Like, it's like it would be like the lunch budget for one day on the set of a big movie. And I wonder if anyone else had this feeling, but like, okay, so we self-financed it, so there was no financiers, there was no producers to really hang over our heads. And I still for a long time felt like I had like a little guy on my shoulder who was like, make it more family friendly, make it more a traditional ending. And it started being really fun to like be combative with that imaginary person. And like the ending of the movie, without spoiling it, is the ending that no studio would have ever let us do, like in a million years. A lot of the things that the characters say are things that I know we would get notes on. My favorite scene in the movie is a completely pointless, like long shot of a big hot dog with Chris Fleming talking, and I know that any executive would have like put the red pen through that. Yeah, I don't know. I think it made it easier to not have financing to be responsible to not have box office returns to be responsible to, for. It was just like so pure in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree that it's you feel freer, when you work with less, you try to do less with more. And also sometimes when you have a really big budget, and a lot of people over you, and all this equipment and stuff, and all the machinery of filmmaking, then it kind of becomes about that, and it kind of shies away. The moment shies away, and this essence of what you're trying to capture is not there anymore. So I think, low budget filmmaking is probably like the future of the industry, because also I don't know, sometimes I feel it's absurd with this super, super huge films and all this money gets spent, and I feel it's kind of like immoral or something. And I think we can make films and create cinema that's cheaper, or we don't have to spend so much money, or we can concentrate on the story, on the craft itself. And I don't know, I think it's something is positive, a positive thing. Obviously we want to have more money for our next film and then make it a bit easier for us, but still I see the benefits of working this very small budgets.
Yeah, for me, I feel like something I learned or that I really appreciated was we didn't really have the money, but then it gave us more time, like not necessarily because we wanted it, but that time helped us like incorporate other elements or think about things a bit more, or just I feel like time made it the film that it is, and that without that obstacle, yeah, it wouldn't be this story in this way. I don't think that maybe we could have, but like it would have been hard to get to like all the layers that we were able to work with, as far as like especially storytelling, but even later in the edit, also just not having all the money was kind of made it all slower and
I think it's fair to assume we're all independent filmmakers, right? Everyone on this call, like we've all, for our entire lives, worked with constraints. And I think over time that teaches you just to think a certain way. And I think everything I wrote, if I write something in a script that I don't think is achievable, I usually cut it. Eephus is the way it is because all of it felt achievable every step of the writing process. And yet, I think actually, when I made this, it was the biggest budget I'd ever had for a film. So it actually felt like a big sandbox to play, compared to other projects I'd worked on and other projects I'd been a cinematographer for. Not really having anything allows you to kind of come up with creative solutions, not only within the frame, but in the production, just thinking about how to streamline certain processes. I mean, there's so much, to Cristian's point, there's so much waste that happens on big budget films. And I just never understood why that needed to be the case. And I frankly still don't. But yeah, at the time we made it, it felt like a big budget. I look back on it now and I kind of wonder how certain things were achievable. But I do think because we did have financiers, but they were so open and accommodating. They didn't breathe down my neck at any point. So we had a lot of time and flexibility to kind of dream up this film. And And like Sarah, there was a really intense period of shot listing because the film is so dependent upon the sun and natural available light. We had to schedule it entirely based on the position of the sun so that the film would have the continuous lighting. But also, I think I've seen a lot of people praise the kind of final innings of the movie, the final 30 so minutes when it's dark, in terms of the look that it has, in terms of night photography. That was really a solution that my DP and I had because we couldn't put a big light in the sky over the field. That's just simply not possible on that budget. So instead, we're using a bunch of cheap old Fresnels and par lights. So like these most rental houses have these, and they don't get rented as much anymore. So it's just a bunch of hard sources, and then you get this kind of chiaroscuro look. That's something that came about just because it was what was available to us. So I think actually if you do kind of the accepted norm of what equipment you need to use or how you might shoot something, sometimes it costs more, but it looks more generic. So I think the constraints end up producing really novel ideas on set.
I 100% agree with all of that. And I think the testament to the different films that you all created with all those constraints like really speaks to that. I want to remind the audience to, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We're going to be opening it up to audience questions soon. But I have another set of questions for everyone here. So people that might be listening who are working on their first or second feature might be curious as to what is one decision that you made that you are really glad you didn't compromise on?
Happy to jump in again if my friends need a second.
Go for it.
There was a moment in prep where someone had really bad behavior that was going to compromise the safety and kind of emotional well-being of my crew. And sort of some of the voices around me were sort of saying, this is a first feature. This is just what you have to put up with. You just have to kind of swallow this hard pill to get this movie made. And I had this moment a few days out from shooting where I felt like I'd rather not make this than make it without integrity. And it had this kind of like aha moment of this is how sets become so toxic because people like compromise. It's this sort of attrition of choice by choice compromising. And it was this moment of realizing that, yes, I'm a beginner, but this is still my pirate ship and I'm the captain of it. And if I say we're not behaving this way, then this is not how we do it. And it helped me realize that I had confused having power with abusive power, and that kind of claiming it is what would create a safe set. And I was really transparent with my crew about that moment, and they then rallied around me and were like, no one has ever picked us before in this way. And that's how we got it done in 18 days. So I guess I feel like that was a turning point for me in realizing that like claiming authority can lead to better collaborative, safe practices on a set, and to not let sort of being a novice keep you from sort of setting your own values in how a crew works together.
Can you repeat the question again? I got distracted for a moment.
Yeah, no, totally fine.
His answer was so good that we lost track.
Yeah, that was great. I was like, snap, snap, snap. So was there a decision that you made on the film that you're really glad you didn't compromise on?
Okay, I have one. It's kind of a bit sillier. It's something I've been feeling really good about for the last couple of days specifically. And my advice to filmmakers as they're working on their first movie, when you're picking the title of the movie, pick something that is early in the alphabet, because it will show up first in like a lot of articles and on streaming platforms and like press releases and stuff. The movie is on United Airlines right now, and the B is like really helping us. So if I could do it again, I would find some way to call the movie Aardvark, and that's a free one for anyone that has the flexibility at this point in their movie journey.
We're gonna see a lot of movies with A's coming up.
I would also
I
say
know I'm going to get clogged out.
I would just say it's also important that you choose the right title for the film, and not just use Aardvark because that's gonna have good SEO. But you made me think of something actually, which is that the title of my film actually we had certain festival programmers suggest that we change it because it wasn't marketable internationally. Because I mean, even here in the U.S., some people don't know that word. Some people don't know how to spell it, but its peculiarity was exactly why we chose it. It made sense thematically. If you've seen the film, it's a slow arcing pitch in baseball. That's a pretty rare pitch and was thrown more in the old days. There's this guy, Bill Lee, who's in our movie, who famously threw the pitch quite a bit. But the movie itself is sort of a slow lobbed pitch. That's the idea. It's to sort of reorient your sense of time. We did flirt with other titles. We thought about different options, but ultimately we stuck to our guns and went with a title that may be on its face less marketable, or less. I think it's very memorable. There's that. So that's one, and then the other thing I had was just I really wanted to have a lot of time to shoot this, and I wanted to basically use every day that we could before all the foliage was gone. We shot this in Massachusetts in October 2022, and it actually bled into the first few days of November. But the way I structured the production allowed us to kind of be flexible. Like I said, I had my cast in town, my crew was in town. We were all kind of very close to the field, and I sort of made sure that everyone was available for that big chunk of time, so that we scheduled it, I think, at maybe 21 days first, but it became a 25-day shoot. And we kind of kept the resources somewhat minimal so that we would enable ourselves to do that. I think that more time is always better, and you discover things in the process. So I would say, yeah, making sure I carved out a lot of time was really crucial.
I mean, I think we were very committed to authenticity and honesty. And we didn't want to compromise that. And also, we always, we usually had like 8 or 10 hour days. They weren't like, sometimes they went a little bit longer, but we always had us like half an hour or maybe an hour during the day where we didn't improvise, but like invented other things, like as a group, depending on the location, what we saw that day, what the actors were thinking about, or so. And I think some of those things made it to the film, and it kept everybody like creative, and the creativeness like on a high, and everybody very like attentive to everything. So I think that's was pretty good. Like even like like the attention to detail, like in the sets, on like the car they go on the run with. We got it out of Facebook Market, and it was kind of a not. I mean, we wanted a shitty car, kind of like a beat down car, and it was a beat down car, and it survived. It kind of like in the film it would break down, but it was actually breaking down on while we were filming, so the car was acting very well. And in the end of the film, we have the car right here in front of our house, and it doesn't work at all. So that was a risk too. Like, what could it, we could like, lost a lot of time. But everything kind of, since everybody was in the same frequency, and everybody's attention was put into into the film, into the scene. I don't know, everything kind of like fell into place, even like weather was perfect. Like on the script, it was gonna rain, it started raining, or different things. Even you were talking about intimacy, like the main characters also kind of like developed this kind of like romantic relationship on set, though, that it was perfect. And sometimes on the scenes that they were kind of mad at each other, it was actually they were kind of pissed at it for some weird reason, so so I don't know, I guess that's behind the scenes.
Amazing. I'm going to switch to some audience questions. So first of all, go around for everyone. Where can people watch your film right now? Is it available?
We're gonna have it's not like a screening anywhere right now. We're gonna have a screening though with Film Independent. That
The 10th. We're gonna have a virtual screening with Independent 10th for the members. So everybody go see it.
You have to drive to Douglas, Massachusetts, where there's a stream of the film playing in the dugout at all times on loop. That's the only way to watch it now. Or you can search on Google and see it on one of those streamers. I think it's on Mubi right now, and it's Amazon Prime as well. Maybe the other. All you got to do is search Google, and it'll pop right up.
Yeah, Boys Go to Jupiter is on Amazon Video on Demand right now for $6. And if you don't have $6, it's going to be on HBO Max, I think in 2 weeks for free. And if you have a lot of money, you could book a flight on United Airlines or I think Emirates Airlines also, if you are going to Saudi Arabia anytime soon. You catch it in your bed seat.
Familiar Touch, it's also streaming on Mubi and on the Film Independent platform, and then anywhere that you rent a movie. So Amazon, iTunes, Apple, YouTube, and if you go to familiartouchfilm.com, it'll lead you to all the different places.
Carson, so being a working DP outside on your own, what was how was your working relationship with Eephus with Greg Tango? And did you find it easier to transition to directing after being a DP?
I've directed for a very long time before I ever even DP'd a feature. So to me, as someone again who worked with very few resources for a very long time, making short films on my own, it's like I always had my hands on the camera. In addition to, we'd frame it, and then I would also work with whichever actor we were working with. So I've always seen them as two kind of very fluid roles. Especially, I think that can be the case on smaller independent projects. There's sort of the lines sometimes blur. And I think being a DP for a long time, especially on a low budget scale, teaches you that filmmaking can be a really physical act. Like you have to pick up a lot of things, move them different places, and that takes time. And especially on a baseball field, which is a pretty big space outdoors, and it's sometimes hard to communicate outdoors in that much space. We had to we had to arrange the schedule in such a way that it would be economical, sort of make it so that we didn't have to move around the field so much or move the camera from first base to third base too often, or lights, from one corner of the outfield to the other corner of the outfield. So knowing that, having that perspective as a DP and understanding kind of how do we optimize this production so we have the fewest possible moves just allows you to focus more on what you're capturing. And so I had that perspective coming in, and for a very long time I thought maybe I would DP this film in addition to directing. But as I started casting people and just realized the scope of what we were trying to capture with all these different actors, I thought that was I came to the realization, fortunately, that was going to be way too much work. Greg Tango is a good friend of mine, and he's a very fantastic DP, and I asked him to do this. We both spent quite a bit of time in pre-production just talking through the different looks in the film, whether it was high noon, afternoon, magic hour, twilight, dusk, night. It was all sort of like a different approach. And I spent a very long time at the field before shooting, just taking photos, and then there wasn't anyone in the frame. I was just taking like every frame of the film, and then I ended up using Photoshop to composite all these figures into the frame, just so we had a really clear idea of what each image would look like roughly. And then that told us kind of where we would need to place where we would need to schedule the shot relative to where the sun was, but also where we might need to have a bounce board. We sort of figured out all of this stuff ahead of time. So I think basically, I think being a DP and having that perspective, ultimately, as a director, it allows you to structure a more productive shoot, more efficient, and ultimately get more footage because you're not running around wasting time with equipment. So that's ultimately how I feel. I mean, I think it's DP and director can often, like I said, just the lines blur, and I think it's great experience to hold your own camera at some point in your career.
And was this everyone's first like feature or no? I know some of you have directed in different ways, but it was some of yours first feature. One of our questions here is kind of like, are you working on your sophomore feature, and what did you learn from making your first feature that you hope to take into your next one, or you has helped you try to make the next one? And anyone can answer. And Julian, you are maybe frozen for us. But go on, anyone who wants to take this.
Yeah, this was our first fiction feature, and we're developing some ideas at the moment, but I mean, we learned so much, and we're still learning, you know. And also, since we're like low budget, we're still kind of like working with the distribution and pushing the film and doing everything ourselves, you know. So it's constant learning process. But I don't know. I think we kind of like created this way of working, also working together and working a small crew that I think we'll keep doing, you know, because it felt very good, and so it was like a huge like school, you know, to make this first feature. I don't know, can even like explain how much we've learned.
I wanted to say this earlier with the compromise question. I just feel like never compromise the essence of your film. And I think that I feel like I learned a lot about like trusting my intuition, and having like trust between each other and having good communication to really like always come back to that center, like to remember kind of like what's the purpose or what's the essence of the story? Why are we making this film? Like, because if you lose those parts of it, then I don't know if it works anymore. You know, it's something, it turns into something else, and you might be able to get the funding for that, but is it the film you want to like make? Is it the story you really want to tell that you really feel you need to tell? And I think that that's for me a really good way to work, and I would definitely keep doing that.
I think wait, I got disconnected for a second. The question is about working on another movie, is that right?
And any lessons that you're taking from working on this first one to the next one?
Am I frozen again?
No, you're good. We can hear you. Oh, you're freezing a little bit. Yep, you're frozen now. Does someone else want to take that one, and we'll wait for Julian?
I am also writing projects. I have two scripts, one of which is a little closer to production than the other. It's a finished script. It is similarly set in a world of a niche sporting world, a regional niche sports community. I don't want to necessarily give that away yet, but we're hoping to shoot that this spring. Yeah, I mean, I've learned quite a bit. I mean, since putting the film out and sort of just being thrust into this industry in a way that I never had been before, showing the film all around the world in different festivals, bringing it to audiences around America during our theatrical run. I just the whole wide world of independent filmmaking has opened up to me in a way it never did before, and I have more support than I did before. With that sometimes comes a sense, you get a lot of enticing offers that sometimes are they're really seductive, but maybe feel as though you might need to compromise in order to accept that offer. I have tried to keep that stuff away as much as possible and just stay true to the kind of movie I want to make. Yeah, I think kind of what Lorraine was just saying. It's just like you just have to stay true to the essence of the idea, because if you're not excited about it, you're not impassioned by it, and it doesn't speak to your soul, then there's no reason to do it. I'm someone who can't really fake it, so I don't want to work on a project that feels like I'm half-assing anything. So yeah, I think that's like the big takeaway is like as many opportunities that might come to you, it's important to just maintain that voice and that specificity.
One of the big things, I'm also developing a second feature, and one of the big things I'm taking away from the first is just like the preciousness of finding your people and bringing them with you. So I've been working with the same DP and production designer for the last 10 years. We made a bunch of shorts and video installations together, and it was all of our first features. And now we're going to make the second feature together, and are bringing other department heads with us. And that shorthand that you have with long-term collaborators is just so invaluable. And so I think that's the thing I'm most excited about, of like the shorthand kind of getting more and more expansive and having that with more and more people. And particularly with this second one, I'm going to keep sort of playing with making films in a choreographic way without them being sort of explicitly dance films, and having peers that get that and want to play with that is wonderful. And I think the other thing I've been thinking about is I was so scared with Familiar Touch to direct a professional actor with dialogue for the first time, and to do that with Kathleen Chalfant, who's like a legend of the New York stage. I was so terrified that she would see my novice immediately and sort of not trust me, or that there would be the gap in our experience would be an impediment. And she showed me that the best collaborators sort of play with you in the gap of what you don't know, and they don't use that against you. And it taught me to just sort of always look for those people. And so that was a huge gift that she gave me.
Julian, I think you're back.
I'm back. Okay. Yeah, I'm finding I've written a couple scripts for potential second features, and I'm finding it very hard to commit to one because I know how it's going to go. I think making my first movie, I was so blind to everything. I so didn't know what was going to happen. It made it so easy to jump into it. It was easy to commit 3 years of my life to this project because I didn't know I was doing it. At every step, I thought I was like almost done, and I was celebrating a lot. And somehow knowing what the process is in front of me now and knowing what it would look like is, one, kind of daunting, and two, like, feels kind of boring. So what I've been trying to do is figure out some process for animation that's different, whether it's taking a more documentary approach or like putting on that ping pong ball suit that Andy Serkis wears and animating that way. I think what I will end up doing is hitting myself on the head with a frying pan until I forget the whole experience, because that seems to be the only way for me to start a new project.
On that beautiful note, I want to thank you all for being here. This was so fun. I really enjoyed talking to everyone. If you are ever in New York, please come hit me up. I'd love to continue this conversation. Thank you to Film Independent for having us and continuing to champion films like this. I hope everyone gets to see these very, very special films. They're all super different, but really beautiful. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.